participants to kindly keep their microphone in the mute mode. This would help us in the better audio and the video quality from our guest speaker. Good evening, friends. Welcome to this 8th edition of webinar organized by Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum. We are very sanguine to inform all our participants of this webinar that this forum, which was constituted with core objective of enhancing legal skills by organizing webinars, symposium, lectures, have received a tremendous and overwhelming response from all quarters. In continuation with our efforts, we organized this webinar on very interesting topic today, that is access to justice pre-COVID, during COVID and post-COVID period. Eminent lawyer from Supreme Court, Shri Sunil Kumar, senior advocate, is present between us to address us on this topic. Now I request Mr. Rajesh Lala, advocate, Jharkhand High Court, to kindly welcome Shri Sunil Kumar, senior advocate, Supreme Court of India. Over to you, Rajesh Bhaiya.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, on behalf of Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum, I welcome each and every one of you for being here with us in this August gathering. My special welcome to our guest speaker, Sri Sunil Kumar ji, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, Delhi. Today we have gathered under this banner of Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum, and today with us is Sri Sunil Kumar, Senior Advocate, and is here to share his views, experience, learning on the topic access to justice pre-COVID, during COVID and post-COVID period. Sri Sunil Kumar is born on September 9, 1956 and is son of a legal luminary, Sri Basudev Prasad, Senior Advocate. Sri Sunil Kumar graduated from Hindu College University of Delhi and did his Master in Arts from University of Delhi. He did his LLB from Patna Law College, Patna University. He has put in more than 36 years as a lawyer and is practicing on the original and appellate side. He has been designated as Senior Advocate in December 2004. He has represented state government under special engagement, and he has also represented central government in the post of Additional Central Government Standing Counsel in several matters in cases of constitutional importance and in criminal cases against Simranjit Singh Mann and others. He has represented State Bank of India, Punjab National Bank in large number of services and labor matters, and has worked as retained lawyer for Financial Corporation and Industrial Investment Bank of India before the Patna High Court and handled a variety of commercial law litigation. He has been practicing before the Supreme Court of India since 2000 and have appeared as senior counsel in matters before the Punjab and Haryana High Court, Jharkhand High Court, Madhya Pradesh High Court, Uttarakhand High Court, and also is appearing before Delhi High Court. Senior counsel for the state of Jharkhand in the Supreme Court of India. He has appeared in varied cases for the state government in high revenue matters as well as constitutional and criminal and service matter. He has appeared for Sri Bangaru Lakshman, former President BJP, before the Justice Venkataswamy Commission of Inquiry and later before Justice Fukan Commission of Inquiry, as also before the trial court. The trustee of Srimati Radhika Sinha Institute and Dr. Sachidanand Sinha Library, State Central Library, Patna. Along with our busy schedule and dedication towards our professional practice and legal learning, it is also necessary to learn from the experience from our honorable judges, senior advocates, legal luminaries, and spokespersons. It is a great pleasure to welcome everyone to our beautiful webinar organized by Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum. We are pleased to be able to welcome those of you that have been with us for years now, as well as those of you who are new to the advocates fraternity. Before we begin this webinar, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you who sincerely committed to this event to make it successful. This event would have been impossible without the support of each and everyone present here. I have been part of the various webinars consistently organized by this Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum, and we have been benefited from the kind oration of judges, senior advocates, legal luminaries, and various spokespersons on various legal topics. During this COVID-19 pandemic, we have not been stopped from our learning process. We have been benefited in our learning through this technology advancement. Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum has been organizing webinar consistently for lawyers, advocates, law learners to gain information, legal updates, and to effectively associate it with legal exercises. Each topic and subject chosen by the Jharkhand Literacy Forum and by the various spokesperson was to the greatest interest for lawyers, in additionally guaranteed that the subject is being enjoyed and preferred. Personal development help us to gain an understanding the progress and advancement of law and its interpretation. It also focus primarily on important aspects such as becoming good human being, good lawyer, developing leadership quality, becoming good orator, and it helps improving confidence, and we learn effective communications. Through this webinar, the advocate will be able to identify their vulnerable places that include improvement as well as the usual changes needed in their lifestyle. In addition, the lawyers present will also be trained on how to improve their respective legal skills. The present topic of webinar will followed with question from audience present, which shall be answered by our expert speaker, Sri Sunil Kumar, from his real life experience and learning. I ensure this webinar will be a profitable and the next hour will be enjoyable and fruitful for every one of you. Thank you very much, Mr. Rahul Sabu and his team members, for giving me this opportunity to give my welcome address for today's gathering and speech by a big personality and a successful lawyer, Sri Sunil Kumar, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. Thank you, Mr. Rahul.
Over to you, Sunil.
Thank you, Mr. Rajesh Lala. I'm obliged to the Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum for giving me this opportunity of being with the colleagues at the bar and sharing my thoughts on a topic of immense importance, which directly concerns us and is of great significance to the populace in general. I will not be delving into case laws and giving you a list of cases, etc., but I'll be sharing my thoughts. I will start with giving a small historical background to the access of justice, and then give you a constitutional perspective to it. I will also then examine as to how it has fared during the pre-COVID days and during the COVID days, and what is the way forward during the post-COVID days. You see, one cannot but be in agreement with Elizabeth Anderson, Executive Director of the World Justice Project, who said that access to justice is a fundamental quality of life issue worldwide. In India, it is a matter of great antiquity and takes us back to the hoary past when there was an ideal stateless society where everyone acted according to dharma and each was protecting the other. Things began to change when powerful individuals, to satiate their desire, began to encroach upon the rights, liberty, and property of those who were weak and who could not really defend themselves. There emerged the concept of kingship, where the king would protect the people and resolve the disputes, and in turn the people would pay taxes to him. Those who were the offenders were punished. In one of the Smritis, it is stated, Dharma eva hato hanti rakshite rakshita, tasma dharmo na hantavyo mano dharmo hato vidit. Dharma protects those who protect it, those who destroy dharma get destroyed. Justice Rama Joyce, in his treatise on ancient law, aptly describes this as incorporating the entire concept of rule of law. And friends, access to justice is a basic principle of rule of law. The epics, as well as other literary sources, are replete with instances of people taking their complaints to the court of the king, and king rendering justice and punishing the offender. Access to justice was access to the court of the king, and the king was the fountainhead of justice. In England, the king would issue written orders under his seal, which facilitated the invoking of the king's justice. There evolved a system of writs during the regime of Henry II, but one of his successors started abusing the king's justice, and there was widespread discontent and suffering. This led to a rebellion and the ultimate signing of the Magna Carta at Runnymede on the 5th of May 1215. Clause 30 of the Magna Carta stated, no one will we sell, to no one will we refuse or delay right or justice. Friends, this was the first codification of the right of access to justice. The common man could vindicate his rights against the individuals who violated them, as also against those who were the authorities for the time being. For many centuries, nearly 500 years after the signing of the Magna Carta, courts in England adjudicated on disputes and set precedents which became the law of the land and came to be known as common law. This experience and the laying down of precedents over 500 years has been very well chronicled by Coke and also by Blackstone in his treatise. And one of the most instructive statements came from Chief Justice Holt in the case of Ashley versus White. That was 1703, 92 ER 126. Chief Justice Holt laid down, if a man has a right, he must have a means to vindicate and maintain it, and a remedy if he is injured in the exercise and enjoyment of it. And indeed, it is vain thing to imagine a right without a remedy for want of right and want of remedy are reciprocal. Clearly, access to justice evolved as a basic right of man, of a human being, and one of the fundamental principles of common law. This common law right was reflected in full glory in the Bill of Rights and the constitutions of various countries. Access to justice as part of the common law right was recognized and followed by courts in India even before the framing of the Constitution of India, and has continued to be so even under the new constitutional regime. Thus, while the preamble secures to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, Article 14 guarantees equality before law and equal protection of laws to all persons. This guarantee becomes meaningful only when all persons have access to justice. Thus, access to justice is a facet of Article 14 to the Constitution of India. Similarly, it is implicit in the guarantee of life and personal liberty as guaranteed under Article 21 and 22(1) of the Constitution of India. One may refer to some of the important judgments, one being the case of Sukhdas, that is AIR 1986, Supreme Court, page 99. Ajmal Kasa, 2012, volume 9, SCC, page 1. And Anita Kushwaha, that's 2016, volume 8, SCC 509. But once again, all these three guarantees would remain only on paper and only for a select few if the state did not facilitate access to justice for the common man. Thus, ingrained in these guarantees are the obligations of the state to ensure access to justice. Various articles in Part 4 you all would find. You'll find which mandates the state to make adequate provision for ensuring access to justice. Article 38 imposes a duty on the state to usher in a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political must inform all institutions of national life. Article 39A provides that state shall secure the operation of the legal system which promotes justice on a basis of equal opportunity, to provide for free legal aid by suitable legislation or schemes in any other way to ensure that opportunities for securing justice are not denied to any citizen by reason of economic or other disabilities. This Article 39A came in by way of an amendment, and it also led to the enacting of the Legal Services Authority Act 1987, which provided for free legal aid. A significant shift was made at this point of time when administration of justice, which was entry 3 in list 2 of the 7th schedule to the Constitution of India, was removed from that list and added as entry 11A in list 3 of the 7th schedule to the Constitution of India. So now the Parliament as well as the state legislators can enact laws to provide free legal aid and equal access to justice for the people of this country. Apart from this, an obligation is cast on the state under Articles 41 and 46 of the Constitution of India to facilitate access to justice by making provision for public assistance in cases of undeserved want within the limits of its economic capacity and development, and promoting with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker section of the people, and in particular the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, to protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation, to enable the states to provide free legal aid. Adequate funds can be resourced under Article 282, which provides for making grants for any public purpose, and providing free legal aid would, by all standards, be a great public purpose. Now, apart from creating rights and casting obligation on the states to secure justice, social, economic, and political, the Constitution also provides for the machinery for exercising the right to access to justice. That is, by making the right to approach the Supreme Court for violation of any of the fundamental rights, a fundamental right itself. Thus, we have Article 32, which can be invoked for violation of any of the fundamental rights. And apart from that, the High Courts have been vested with the power to issue writs, orders, or directions under Article 22-26 of the Constitution of India for infringement of any legal right. The Supreme Court is also vested with the authority to pass appropriate orders in cases for doing complete justice between the parties under Article 142 of the Constitution of India. And significantly, the rights guaranteed under these numerous articles of the Constitution are confined not only to the citizens, but to all persons, thus universalizing the access to justice. Both the Supreme Court and the High Courts, in keeping with the spirit of the Constitution, have exercised epistolary jurisdiction by treating letters as writ petitions. Another mode of providing justice has been through the public interest litigations. Our courts have also given a very expansive meaning to locus standi to facilitate access to justice. Therefore, in the constitutional scheme of things, we see that apart from access to justice being considered as a fundamental right guaranteed under Articles 14 and 21 and 22(1) of the Constitution of India, obligation being cast on the state to provide for legal aid and provide all the wherewithal through which persons may access justice. The machinery, the modality is also prescribed through various articles like 32, 226, 142. I had mentioned earlier a judgment of the Supreme Court in the case of Anita Kushwaha. That judgment, reported in 2016, volume 8 SCC 509, it reiterates the principles that access to justice is a facet of the right to life and equal protection of laws. It gives the main facets that constitute the essence of access to justice. They are: 1. The state must provide an effective adjudicatory mechanism. 2nd, the mechanism so provided must be reasonably accessible in terms of distance. 3rd, the process of adjudication must be speedy. And 4th, the litigant's access to the adjudicatory procedure must be affordable. Now, all these facets, according to me, are interrelated, and keeping them into mind, let us see as to how they have worked out in the past 7 decades, right up to the onset of this COVID-19 epidemic. There are certain issues which are concerns actually, which I would like to highlight. The first of them is the location of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is located in Delhi. There are a large number of people whose rights are infringed, who are living in far out places, maybe in the northeast, maybe in deep south, but are not able to approach the Supreme Court only because of the sheer distance and the cumbersome process of traveling and coming to Delhi to access justice. This has been a concern. The Law Commission of India has, in its various reports, has made recommendations that benches of the Supreme Court should be established in different parts of the country. As a matter of fact, a proposal at one point of time had also been mooted, but the same was turned down by none other than the Supreme Court itself. In this connection, if you would note that there is an Article 130 in the Constitution of India, which provides that Supreme Court shall sit in Delhi or in such other place or places as the court, as the Chief Justice, with the approval of the President, may from time to time appoint. But in these 7 decades, no such benches have been appointed. Benches of the Supreme Court may be located at other places to facilitate and make real access to justice. Somehow, this has not happened till today. I'm not only talking about Northeast and Deep South. I have many a time received calls from people from Bihar and also from Jharkhand that they are not able to approach the Supreme Court merely because of the cumbersome process and the distance from the place where they live. There may be someone who's living in a remote village in Jharkhand. People are innocent. Their property, land, etc. are sought to be snatched by them. And in many such cases, they are simply not able to access justice and move the Supreme Court. Maybe they are not satisfied with the judgment of the High Court, and they have to resign themselves to their fate, saying that going to the Supreme Court is beyond their reach. This is not really a very happy situation, and it was only just and proper that benches of the Supreme Court were established at other centers, at other places in the country also. Access to justice has to be made meaningful, and when the right to approach the Supreme Court for violation of a fundamental right was itself made a fundamental right, it was only just and proper that benches of the Supreme Court came to be established at other places. In this pre-COVID era, we have seen in these 7 decades that nothing of this sort has happened. Now, in this connection, I may also draw your attention to one more provision of the Constitution, that is Article 32(3), which says that the Parliament may by law empower any other court to exercise within the local limits of its jurisdiction all or any of the powers exercisable by the Supreme Court under Clause 2. Here was again an opportunity to make access to justice more expansive, elaborating it, but never any attempt has been made to make this provision functional. Access to justice has to be enlarged. We have a very large population in this country, and gradually people are becoming more conscious of their rights every day. And as was held by the Supreme Court in the case of M.B. Dabholkar, that is 1975 to SCC 702, the apprehension that widening the access may unloose a flood of litigation is misplaced. Now, apart from the location of the Supreme Court, if we go back to what are the four facets which have been laid down in the Anita Kushwaha case, that distance has become a deterrent. The next facet is that justice has to be seen to be done. People must hear, understand, and see the hearings. Now, I'll give you an example of this. In the Supreme Court, microphones have been installed in the courtrooms for the judges and for the lawyers. But hardly ever are those microphones used. The litigants and others who are sitting in the visitors' gallery, they are at a total loss to know as to how the case is proceeding, what is being argued, what is the query of the judge. They are nothing but mute spectators. Many a time you would find that a client would come out or some litigant would come out and ask you that what happened in this case, what was the order passed. It is the participation, this kind of a participation for the litigant is actually fruitless. Apart from that, even the press many a time goes after lawyers to find out as to what has happened in the case, what was the order passed by the judges. This, in my opinion, is a great fallacy, and it has to be addressed both at the level of the Supreme Court as also in the High Courts. I have seen in the High Courts also, particularly in High Courts where you have very large courtrooms. The clients are there in the visitors' gallery and they just have no clue as to how their cases have proceeded. Proposals were mooted for recording of court proceedings. In my opinion, this is a matter of utmost importance, and this will be a great reform of our justice delivery system and access to justice if court proceedings are video recorded. Because ultimately it is people's confidence in the justice delivery system that sustains the country and sustains the judicial system. I would like to share with you all 2-3 experiences that I got while conducting certain matters here. The first one was, I was appearing for Mr. Bangaru Lakshman before the Justice Venkat Swamy Commission of Inquiry. Now, in the Inquiry Commission, all the proceedings were audio recorded. There was one Mr. Aniruddha Bahal of Tehelka.com, who was being cross-examined and re-examined. I somehow got a feeling that this witness is reading from a sheet of paper in front of him. Just a pot shot in the dark, I requested Justice Venkat Swamy to ask the witness if he was reading from a sheet of paper or he was giving answers to the questions or issues raised by his counsel during the process of re-examination. Justice Venkat Swamy asked the witness, and he admitted that yes, he had a sheet of paper in which answers had been written and he was reading from those answers. Then his counsel was asked that if he also had a paper from which he was putting questions. And he was also found to have the same sheet of paper in which questions and answers were written. So this re-examination was just reading out from papers. This was taken serious notice of, and Justice Venkateswamy directed that this will not be taken into consideration. Now, every day at the end of the proceedings, we used to get record of the proceedings, record of the day's proceedings. When we got the record of the day's proceedings, we found the entire episode regarding Mr. Aniruddha Bahal was not there. Imagine at a time when there was audio recording, there was no video recording, the entire episode with Mr. Aniruddha Bahal was not there. I filed a petition before Justice Venkateswamy telling him that, look, how is this possible? Because, the court, the judges draw inference from the demeanor of the witnesses, from the way he answers questions, and what questions, what answers does he give. And ultimately, he had to pass a fresh order to bring all those on record. Imagine those were the NDA days, and Mr. Bangaru Lakshman was the former president of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Next day, most of the press was also totally silent on this episode. It's only one newspaper, Pioneer, which reported something. What I'm trying to emphasize is, look, what is the great importance of audio-video recording of court proceedings? The same thing was repeated in the inquiry commission itself when I was cross-examining Professor Upender Bakshi. You see, Professor Upender Bakshi had flown down from London to depose in favor of the Tehelka journalists. He was being cross-examined right from the morning, and it was nearly 3:30 when my turn to cross-examine him came. At that hour, I knew that if Professor Upender Bakshi, he's a very great scholar, a very knowledgeable person, that if he would know the line of questioning, he would be more than well prepared on the next day to give all the answers. And my cross-examination was not going to end in the short period of half an hour. So I requested the court. I told the chairman that, Your Lordship, the professor has been on his legs since morning. Maybe he's not taken such an arduous task in the university also. So I think we should adjourn and resume tomorrow. And the chairman acceded to my request, and the cross-examination was done on the next day. On the next day, my cross-examination was there, it got over. But once again, when the day's proceedings came, my entire cross-examination of Professor Upender Bakshi was not there. These are issues which shows that how important it is to have a audio-video recording of the proceedings of a court or of a tribunal. I have seen this both in the Supreme Court of United Kingdom in London as also in the Supreme Court of United States, where there is a live relay telecast of the court proceedings, and they are archived also, so that any time that a person concerned may like to access them, he can access them. This will be very relevant also in cases of trial, where the judgment of the trial court comes up in appeal to the High Court. And this was again the third incident which I would like to relate, is the incident in the trial of Mr. Bangaru Lakshman. In his case, the FIR which had been lodged was not signed by anyone. When the IO was in the witness box, I asked him a question that who has lost this FIR? I have great respect for that IO, a gentleman from Darbhanga. He said, sir, the FIR was drawn up by me and my superintendent of police. I immediately told the judge that the statement of the witness may be recorded immediately. The judge refused to record the statement. He said, okay, very well, let me first understand what the witness is trying to say. हाँ भाई बताओ witness, did you extend one hand and the superintendent of police extended the other hand and you together drew the FIR? The witness was totally shocked and taken aback. But he held his ground and he said that, sir, I was on the typewriter typing and my superintendent of police was standing right behind me. Now, when this judgment which was rendered by the trial court, it has gone up in appeal to the High Court and the appeal is still pending. Imagine a situation where the deposition of witnesses are all video recorded and it is available to the appellate court to examine, see for itself as to how the trial had proceeded. How, to a great extent, it will further the interest of justice and the right guaranteed under Article 21 and 22. They will be ensured. Therefore, my view is that all court proceedings must be video recorded. There was a writ petition filed in the Delhi High Court for the same, but Justice Deepak Mishra, who was then the Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court, after writing a judgment, he ultimately said that, you see, it is for the legislature to make a law and we are not going to pass any order or give any guidelines or directions at this stage. The matter has gone to the Supreme Court and the matter is still pending in the Supreme Court, being referred to a larger bench, and God knows when that larger bench hearing will take place. Now, as far as the affordability, affordability was also one of the facets which was mentioned in Anita Kushwaha is concerned. I may only say that free legal aid is not really measuring up to the mark. You compare the legal aid, the legal assistance that a person gets and what the other side may engage, which is well off, may engage, and it will be a totally unequal fight in the court. Therefore, legal aid has to be made more appropriate, more functional, and provisions have to be made for it. As I have told you, Article 282 is already there, which provides for making funds available for public purpose. Things have to be made a little more lucrative for the legal aid lawyer also. He has to be provided with adequate means of books, assistance, etc., and reinforce the legal aid system, whole lock, stock and barrel. Another facet which comes to the mind when you consider access to justice is the appointment of judges. What access to justice if there are no judges in the courts? A number of high courts are functioning only with 50%, half of their strength. Is the access to justice meaningful? Will it be a speedy justice? Let me tell you that the number of cases being filed, that alone should not be any index. What has to be seen is that how many people are there to consider those cases and dispense with justice. Now, these are just some of the issues that came to my mind. in the pre-COVID period, that is in the working of the Constitution and the access to justice in the past 7 decades. Now, during the COVID period, matters are being done through video conferencing. It is the virtual court now. But in a country like India, not everyone is well equipped to do a virtual hearing. Constitutional courts, well, it's all right. Supreme Court, the High Courts, they are doing virtual hearing. But imagine the plight in the district courts, how trials are to be conducted by virtual hearing, and access to justice cannot be kept in abeyance or cannot be negative by such provisions of a video conferencing. A lot of difficulty is being faced by all the litigants, as also the lawyers practicing in the various courts, particularly the district courts. This COVID pandemic has really thrown a challenge, and one keeps on hearing every now and then that you have to learn to live with it, that the good old days of normal are not going to come back. Therefore, this COVID period has become an eye-opener and something where you have to think out of the box and make provision for access to justice, make it more meaningful. Even during the COVID period, you see the Supreme Court is not functioning full strength. It's only some of the courts which are functioning. Of course, I am told that Patna High Court, Jharkhand High Court have been functioning full strength, and the Patna High Court has probably considered, heard and decided the maximum number of cases during this COVID epidemic. But the district courts and trial courts are definitely lagging behind. And that is actually a denial of justice. Ways and means have got to be found out. Just like, say, there was no one to administer an oath and affidavits could not be filed. So the courts allowed that petitions to be filed without being affidavit, and on the undertaking that when normal things resume, the affidavit would be provided for. So that at least made the system workable. But then it again posed some problems. Like in one case, an affidavit on a statement was made in the petition, which was palpably false, and it was found to be false. So the issue arose that would this amount to contempt? There was an argument that, look, this is not on oath, this is not on affidavit, and therefore it will not be contempt. But then this is the device which was adopted to facilitate, court proceedings, access to justice. I was of the opinion that definitely this would also amount to a contempt, because this is a kind of a fraudulent representation that you are making to the Supreme Court, calculated to mislead the Supreme Court or the High Court. Therefore, these are some of the issues which have come up during the COVID period, which urgently need to be attended to and which are impeding access to justice. But while looking to the minus points, one cannot ignore the gains that have been made. The other day, in the virtual hearing before the Supreme Court, The lawyer was in Chennai and he was appearing, a link is sent to him, he is appearing from Chennai. It is not necessary for him to come to Delhi to argue a case in the Supreme Court. So one problem which had been existing in the pre-COVID era of Supreme Court being located in Delhi and not easily accessible, that gets taken care of because the lawyer there is arguing from Chennai. At the same time, link is also sent to the client. That was only where he can see and hear the proceedings, and the client can also see and hear the proceedings in the court in virtual hearing. So this, in my opinion, is one of the gains of the that has been made in the COVID period. The problem of distance goes, and apart from that, you see, there is a record of the proceedings to some extent. We can go on improving upon this. This has to be fine-tuned. You have to go on improving upon this because it has to be made public. So you can have television sets, etc., at vantage points or at different places in the bar associations or wherever, from where even the public, the press, because participation of press is also very important in this access to justice. So these are, in my opinion, some of the gains that we have made during the COVID period, and which should not be lost. Of course, provision has to be made. The lawyers and the judges have to be more well equipped. The bar councils may play a very active role in this, in providing wherewithal to lawyers so that they may equip themselves in terms of getting the equipment, and also in getting used to, trained to do virtual hearings. Because once it has come, I feel this may not be something which will be wished away, and it is here to stay. And it may turn out to be a good thing. Of course, physical hearing has to be there, but the cases can be apportioned between physical hearing and virtual hearing. The virtual hearing infrastructure has to be upgraded. And once it is upgraded and enhanced, of course, people will with time get used to it, and it will be something which will facilitate access to justice. This gain of the COVID period should be carried forward to the post-COVID period also. The greatest problem would lie in the post-COVID period would be the the district courts, the trial courts, as to how those trials would proceed. Of course, it is not a problem which cannot be surpassed, but then it requires a Herculean effort, because we have a number of very disadvantaged people who are many a time unwillingly or willingly dragged to courts, and they stand to suffer injustice because of denial of access to justice. Therefore, in the post-COVID period, in my opinion, the gains of the COVID period must be retained. But at the same time, physical hearing should also start. And till such time as we do not have a more elaborate infrastructure, unless we have upgraded all our systems, and that may not be very easily possible for the entire population, that physical hearing will have to be there. The permission of people to seek justice, the permission that is needed for people to access justice must be fine-tuned so that it becomes a reality. Those are some of my thoughts which I thought would share with you, because you see, one of the members of parliament in Great Britain said that public hearing would mean that public should have the opportunity to see, hear, and understand the proceedings. Therefore, in the post-COVID period, we should have this as a mantra, that people are able to access the court and there is a public hearing where the public can see, hear, and understand the proceedings. Those are some of my thoughts on the access to justice in the three periods. And if there are any questions, I would like to answer them, please.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful speech on a very important topic, access to justice pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID period. Now I request the participants of this webinar, if they have any questions, they can ask our guest speaker and he would reply them. Now, I think, sir, thank you so much for this wonderful speech, sir. Now,
may I put a question?
Yes, Rajesh Bhaiya, please.
Sir,
Rahul, you are not audible.
Sir, you have referred to the Ajmal Kasab case. What was the ratio that has been decided with respect to access to justice? We would like to be enlightened by your lordship.
Should I unmute myself? Should I mute myself?
No, sir, you don't have to mute. There is a question which has been put by Mr. Rajesh Lala. Yes, Rajesh Bhaiya, sir, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am able to hear. Sir, may I repeat the question?
I think there is some audio problem.
There is an audio.
Sunil sir, there is an audio problem from your end.
No, I'm not able to hear all of you.
Are you able to hear me, sir? Again, there is some technical glitches on part of Sir would be again joining us. There is some technical glitches. Yes, he has joined us again.
I can hear you now.
Yes, sir. Now you are audible, sir. And Rajesh, Mr. Rajesh Lala, kindly put your question.
Sir, you refer to a case law with respect to Ajmal Kasab. what it was decided with respect to access to justice in this said case, Your Worship.
Yes. You see, the only point that has been decided in all these three, in Ajmal Kasab and the Subdas case, as also in Anita Kushwaha, is that Article 21 guarantees life and personal liberty. No one's life and personal liberty can be deprived except by process of law, and the process has to be reasonable. As an aspect of this reasonable process, what has been held is that a person who is accused of an offense, he needs to be defended. If he cannot defend himself, he needs to be defended at the cost of the state. And access to justice, they have held, is an aspect of Article 21 and 22(1) of the Constitution of India.
Thank
Sir,
you, sir.
there is one question from Mr. Gaurang Jajudia, advocate. He has a question that does the system of advocate on record in Supreme Court restricts access to justice with respect to Supreme Court? If advocates across the country are allowed to file and appear before the Supreme Court without an AOR, will it not be more accessible?
You see, even the advocate on record system, it was evolved with a purpose, you see. And those were the times when a lawyer, being an advocate on record, he had to be conversant with the practice and procedure of the Supreme Court, with things like bookkeeping, etc. And he had to reside within a radius of 14 miles of the Supreme Court, so that the notices could be served on him, so that he can attend to the registry, etc. But this was long back. Now, with the advancement of technology, it does definitely requires a rethink. Because as far as the legality of the system is concerned, I don't think that is open to question, because it is for the courts also to lay down the qualifications. Just like you have qualifications now laid down that you have to pass a bar examination, someone says you have to qualify this. So also an advocate on record. And the advocate on record has great responsibilities on his shoulder. You see, like, he cannot say, I will not appear in a court because my client has not paid my fee. He is answerable to the court for everything. He is not to be a mouthpiece for his client, but be an officer of the court. And therefore, but as I said, all this will have to be given a rethink for the reason that if virtual court is going to be a norm, and people sitting in distant places are going to be in a position to access the court, there's going to be e-filing, then how will a person who is located in far-off place do his e-filing if he is not an advocate on record? It would be a totally different matter that if the advocate on record goes and stays in a far-off place and he's filing his cases from there. But a person who is not an advocate on record with the Supreme Court, but he is staying in a far-off place, for him to do an e-filing, some way out will have to be found, so that he will be the virtual court becomes more functional, and access to justice becomes a reality.
Sir, thank you so much, sir. Sir, now I have a question. Myself,
Yes.
I have a question which I have always been thinking about. Sir, that whether the decentralization of Supreme Court that is having benches at different parts of the country would result in more access to justice?
No, that is why, you see, I was reading an article by Justice Rumapal, and she said that the proposal of the Law Commission had come to the Supreme Court, and the judges were consulted. But all of the judges said that no, we cannot have benches of the Supreme Court. This will lead to a flood of litigation and this will be diluting the efficacy of the Supreme Court, etc. But now Justice Ruma Pal in retrospect says we were wrong. We were wrong because if you had benches of the Supreme Court in different parts of the country, then there will be greater access to justice. People will be able, at one point of time, there was even a proposal to have 5 courts of appeal in the different locations. But that was also dropped. But then having benches in the different parts of the country is something which does require a very serious reconsideration.
Sir, as you said, that merely the denial of benches of the Supreme Court at different parts of the country on the pretext that there would be flood of cases in the Supreme Court. Does it not amount to a denial of justice to the litigants?
That is why I told you, Supreme Court in the case of Dabholkar has held that it is a total misnomer that there will be a flood of litigation. You see, the increase in litigation is always attributed to the justice system that is working in a country. If there are more litigation, that only shows that your democracy is vibrant and your justice system is more sound. In my opinion, that should not be taken at all as anything which may impede justice.
Do we have any more questions for the participants? Now I request Bouquet.
Rahul, your voice is not clear. Rahul, your voice is not clear.
Rahul Bhaiya, you are not audible.
I'm extremely sorry for the technical glitch on my part. Now I hope I am audible now.
Rahul, it is not clear. No, it's not clear.
I would request Sri Atul Banerjee to kindly convey the vote of thanks.
Good evening, sir. The learned speaker today, Sri Sunil Kumarji. In fact, I am having the privilege of giving vote of thanks on a day when we had occasion to hear a person of such a legal stature with 35 years of wide experience. At the outset, I would extend thanks on behalf of the Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum and also on my behalf for being enlightened by Sir Sri Sunil Kumarji on the constitutional aspects, on the view of the lawmakers about access to justice. Sir, you have very nicely and concisely put the things, starting from Article 38 and then the amendment. And then the amendments, sir, you are very right, very comprehensive manner you have made us understand 38A, and then the manner in which the lawmakers thought it proper that it should be within the domain of both the union as well as the state to make laws for access to justice and therefore making suitable amendments in the constitutional list. And then, sir, you have shared your experience. We are really enlightened, and we have learned something from your experience so far as Mr. Bangalu Lakshman's case is concerned, and your perception on the video recordings of the judicial or quasi-judicial proceedings. That is on basis of your practical experience. From that, we have been able to learn a lot. And besides, sir, you have very elucidately come to the topic by discussing the constitutional provisions, the constitutional vision of providing access to justice, free legal aid, going to the previous 7 decades before the COVID period. And then, sir, you have explained the COVID period pros and cons also, the difficulties which may be faced by the district courts, and then the post-COVID period. We are also quite thoughtful now because of your thought-provoking address on the issues of access to justice and the role of Parliament and the authority given to the Parliament, especially as we described Article 32(3), which gives power to the Parliament for making provisions, suitable provisions, empowering for exercise of powers as vested by Article 32(2) to the Honorable Supreme Court of India. And then, as you explained with respect to the Anita Kushwaha case, which is a leading case on facets of right to life and equal protection, and the four facets which are important. And then I must be thankful, sir, because of your thought-provoking speech. Our colleagues, the audience, Rajesh ji, then Mr. Jajodia, and then Rahul himself has put questions, and we are fortunate to have answers from you on this, especially on the aspect of Article 21 and the access to justice, and especially the interesting question put by Mr. Jajodia on so far as the access to justice when there is a system of advocates on record and now there is a system of e-filing. So, sir, it will be, whatever is said will be much less so far as what we have learned today, especially from your practical experience and the manner you have made us understand the constitutional aspect of providing access to justice, free legal aid, the view of the lawmakers, and then it will made all of us think over the process and how to aid the justice delivery system when there are provisions, when the Parliament has been given authority by the constitutional machinery to make such provisions for providing effective access to justice to the really needy persons. Sir, once again, I thank you on behalf of the Legal Literacy Forum for sparing your valuable time and for sharing your views on this important aspect which is always liquid and which is always open for further deliberations. Sir, we will be always grateful and obliged to you for sparing your valuable time to share your views with us, and that too in such a nice manner with a background of the constitutional provisions coupled with your own personal experiences. Thank you, sir. And then I would like to thank the Jharkhand Legal Literacy Forum, which is taking all the pain to conduct such programs, because of which we all are able to hear honorable speakers like sir, as today we have the occasion to hear. And lastly, but not the least, I'm thankful to all the advocate members and the other persons who were here as audience to this webinar, because of whom this webinar has met its objective. Thanks, sir. And finally, thanks to Mr. Rahul Sahu for his commendable job, for his vision to have such a program in weekend, which is really very beneficial for all of us, the members of the legal fraternity. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Sunil.
Thank you so much to each and everyone for participating in this webinar, and thank you so much, Mr. Sunil Kumar, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, and thank you, Mr. Atanu Banerjee, thank you, Mr. Rajesh Lala, and all the participants. Thank you once again. Thank you so much.